Hey everybody, my name is Chris and I'm one of the pastors here on staff at Blackhawk Church, and tonight I'm supposed to talk to you guys about pain and suffering. Or another way of saying that is where is God when life sucks? Years ago I was a pastor in Shreveport, Louisiana, and I got a knock on my door 3 in the morning on a Saturday night. And this man who was part of our church said, Pastor, this disaster has happened. Charles Berry has been in a car wreck. So I got my clothes on and I went down to the hospital, and there I found this really tragic scene. And this man named Charles Berry had been taking his daughter, Carla, to a concert where she was performing. And they drove back from the concert, and as they were driving back late on a Saturday night, a person who was driving another vehicle who was drunk crossed the median, slammed into their car, and killed Charles immediately when they had the car wreck. His wife was riding with them, Peggy, and she was ejected from the car. And she had all kinds of broken bones. And she was in the hospital, and I was visiting her. But Carla was in the back seat. Carla was about 16 or 17. And Carla was thrown into the back seat of her dad. And she was really in bad shape. When I got to the hospital, she was like in a coma. All the bones in her face were crushed. And so she couldn't wake. She didn't know anybody was there. So a couple days later, I had to do the service for her dad's funeral, and her mother wasn't at her dad's funeral because she was too sick to be there. And Carla, of course, didn't even know anything was happening. About a week later, Carla kind of awoke, and then I told her dad had died in a wreck. And it was just, a horrible scene. One of the things that Carla had to struggle with all the bones broken in her face, was that her jaw was wired shut. And she couldn't open her mouth or anything, and they kind of fed her through intravenous tubes in her arms, and then eventually they were able to put a straw kind of thing in her mouth. All her teeth were knocked out. Eventually, Carla got stronger and better. She was able to leave the hospital. And I remember visiting her, like in her house one day, and I was just talking to her about the tragedy. And she looked at me and she said, Pastor Chris, why did my dad have to die in that wreck? That's a hard question. And she was going through a lot of pain and suffering right then. Now, that's a tragic story, and a lot of us haven't been in car wrecks. Most of us haven't, and most of us maybe haven't lost our dad in a wreck or something, but many of us have gone through things that are very, very difficult, and they're very painful. Some of us might have lost like a grandparent. Some of us might have a parent who has cancer, who's really, really sick. Some of us might have a friend who's really, really sick. Some of us might have something might have happened to us, like we've been betrayed. Somebody kind of stabbed us in the back and it hurt us. And we're going through pain and suffering, and we kind of wonder, why does this happen? I don't know the answer to that. Like, why does God allow these things? Like, where is God when life sucks? Sometimes I don't know. But I do know a couple of things about pain and suffering. One thing about pain and suffering is that we can learn things on rough roads that we would never ever learn on smooth roads. That's what happened to Carla. About 3 years after the accident, I got a phone call, and it was somebody from our church who was working in a hospital. They were respiratory therapists. And they called me up and they said, Pastor Chris, can you get up to the hospital? There's been a horrible accident on the highway, and a young girl and her boyfriend have been hit by a truck while they were riding their bicycles. So they weren't a part of our church, but I went up to the hospital. When I got up to the hospital, this therapist then told me the story that this young woman was from Sweden. Her name was Heidi. She was actually training for the Olympic team in Sweden, and she was riding across the country with her fiance on a bicycle, 2 different bicycles. A truck went off the road, hit her fiance, and killed him, and then knocked her off her bike. Physically, she was in pretty good shape. She was a great athlete. But her jaw was wired shut. And the doctors were afraid that she was so depressed and discouraged because of this great tragedy that she wasn't going to get any better. So I walked into her room and I saw her. I saw that her jaw was wired shut. And I introduced myself, and she didn't even want to look at me. I mean, she was so sad because, her boyfriend had just died. She's from another country. There was nobody that she knew. And I looked at Heidi and I said, I've got a friend who, she was in an accident once and her jaw was wired shut. Her dad died in the accident. Would it be okay if she comes and talks to you? Well, Heidi's eyes just lit up. She grabbed a piece of paper. She wrote yes on it. And I went out of the room and called my friend Carla. This had been 3 years after the accident. Carla rushed up to the hospital, and she went into that room, and I said, Heidi, this is my friend Carla. These girls had never met before. And there was an instant bond there. And Carla shared her experience with Heidi. And Heidi's eyes just lit up, and she sat up in bed, and these 2 girls just hugged on each other and cried in each other's arms. Here's the thing with that. Carla learned that she had a special ability to talk to people who were going through horrific, challenging, and stressful times. She would have never learned that if she hadn't have gone through that time herself. She learned something on a rough road that she would have never, ever learned on a smooth road. Another thing I know about suffering is that when we go through pain and suffering in our life, we can't see clearly. Pain and suffering is so difficult that it messes up our ability to see things, to see life clearly. When we go through pain and suffering, it's like we have goggles on, and these goggles, I can't see out of these goggles at all. I can't see my hands, I can't see the camera, I can't see anything. If I was going to walk across the room, I would need somebody to come and hold my hand and help me just do the simplest things. That's what happens when we go through something that is horrific and painful. We can't see clearly. We need somebody to come along in our life and hold our hand and help us. Because wounds heal. We don't think they heal when we're going through hard times, but they do heal. And that's what Carla was doing for Heidi. She came into her life and helped her. Heidi was not even in her own country. And Carla became friends with her, kind of held her hand, and helped her go through the death of her boyfriend and a very difficult situation she was in. Tonight you're going to read a passage from Colossians about the fact that the Jesus community, people who are followers of Christ, we're supposed to clothe ourselves with kindness and compassion, gentleness and humility. The reason God wants us to do that is that so that we can come alongside of other people who are hurting. And sometimes the best people that can do this are people who've experienced pain and suffering themselves.